welcome back to World Crisis Radio. More now on John P. Holdren, quoting from his book, primarily Eco-Science, 1977, co-authored with Ehrlich and Ehrlich, two environmentalist crackpots, genocidalists from Stanford University. Triage for the less developed countries, triage for the third world, says Holdren. It means that if you have food aid, forget the countries that will make it without it, and forget the ones that are doomed, and just give it to the ones where it might make a difference. Who is doomed? Well, Bangladesh is doomed, writes Holdren in 1977. Forget about Bangladesh. That's a couple of 100 million right there. And India may well be doomed, says Holdren. Who else might be doomed? Well, he's got a great love for William Paddock. The Paddock brothers had written a book called Famine 1975, where they said that the optimum population for Mexico is 18 million, or was in 1977. At that point, there were 60 million people in Mexico. That meant that 42 million had to go. You can see that we're in the area of ultra-Hitlerian demographic operations. Again, the big thing is to stop the development of the less developed countries. Holdren is in favor of a one-world government. Yes, indeed. He wants a planetary regime, a supranational monstrosity of technocrats that will dictate to the sovereign states, infringe on national sovereignty, destroy it, and impose world ecosphere controls. World ecosphere controls. Now, it sounds like what Obama was doing there at the Group of Eight, demanding legally binding carbon limits from China, India, Brazil, and the rest of the less developed countries. They're, of course, rebuffing him. The Copenhagen Conference will be a disaster at the present rate. Hillary Clinton also rebuffed by the Indian ecology minister. But Holdren wants world ecosphere controls, a supranational world government with the global commons being regulated. Global commons meaning the atmosphere, the oceans, and the soil. This area will be dominated by the planetary regime with world ecosphere controls. Then they will also set an optimum world population. Now, a couple of other things. As we know from Obama, it is the women in your life that show what you really care about. And for Holdren, the wife, in his case, wife of more than 40 years by now, Cheryl Holdren, she is included in the anthology that we have here, the Cassandra Conference, Resources and the Human Predicament. This is 1985, so we're in the middle of the Reagan wasteland, and they're putting out plans for future Malthusian regimes. The Cassandra Conference, Resources and the Human Predicament, edited by Ehrlich once again, and by John P. Holdren of the Obama White House. So Cheryl Holdren's essay in here starts with praise for Rachel Carson. Third World, take note. Rachel Carson, of course, Silent Spring, 1962. That was the opening salvo of radical environmentalism, and it led to the banning of DDT about 10 years later. DDT, the most effective insecticide to kill killer mosquitoes, banned. Hundreds of millions of deaths in Africa, South Asia, Latin America have resulted from the lack of DDT. That is genocide. So Cheryl Holdren also supporting these doctrines. This speaks volumes about the mentality of Holdren. Now let's bring it back home. For the United States, we have to raise energy prices, says Holdren. The prices of energy, oil, gasoline, are unrealistically low. They've got to be raised to make energy scarcer. Burden on you. Further decline in the U.S. standard of living. New forms bordering on genocide. Depletion quotas have got to be imposed on natural resources. Naturally, Holdren, as a dedicated environmentalist crackpot, has bought into the Meadows and Forrester Limits of Growth report to the Club of Rome, 1972, which predicts that the depletion of the main categories of raw materials will lead to the collapse of civilization in the early 21st century. Around now, because medical care will collapse, seems to be happening out in Wise, Virginia, population will then collapse in the 21st century. Problem with this is that the known reserves of all the main raw materials are greater now than they were in 1972, despite the consumption that has taken place in the meantime. So there are no limits to growth. The limits to growth study is a crackpot, quackademic study which has been discredited. It just didn't happen. Even the Club of Rome with Pastel and others have basically tried to correct that over time. There is no population bomb. Population in the United States, stagnant and kept up by the influx of immigrants. Japan in decline. Europe in decline. Russia in decline. Vast areas of the world in decline. China, population growth slowing. Idem in India. Most people would say that it's going to level off towards the middle of the 21st century, maybe sooner if Holdren can unleash the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So, again, he wants to have depletion quotas on resources. He wants to have a federally imposed maximum income limit. Well, an interesting idea from Holdren. He wants to stop population growth. There has to be, says Holdren, a population law that will impose family size limits. The size of your family is going to be regulated by crackpots and quackademics like Holdren. What if you've reached your family limit, you have 2 kids already, and the wife is pregnant? What happens then? Compulsory abortion, says Holdren. Compulsory abortion is constitutional, he argues. So now let's look at his other measures. He first of all goes through a catalog of socioeconomic measures to limit family formation, to oppose family formation, and to limit the birth of children. First of all, rewrite the tax code to favor single people, to make small families more attractive under the tax law. For example, that would mean that the exemption, the income tax exemption you get, personal exemption for children, would be abolished. The child tax credit would be abolished. I think probably education credits would also be abolished if you get over a certain size of family. Make the fee for a marriage license as high as possible, says Holdren. When you go to that Justice of the Peace in Pennsylvania, you've got to pay through the nose. Tax luxury baby goods, says this crackpot. What does that mean? Winnie the Pooh is going to be taxed. Remove family allowances. Well, no danger. The U.S. has no family allowances. France and many Europeans do. Get rid of them, says Holdren. Free public education, says Holdren, has to have limits. If you get over 2-child families, then those benefits have got to be lifted. You pay to send your kid to public school. Where there are maternal benefits, let's say under Medicaid for poor women who are expectant mothers, abolish it, says Holdren. Let those poor women fend for themselves. Let's pay people a bonus not to get married. Let's encourage childless couples in every way possible. And if you have a teenage mother with an illegitimate child, what should happen? Holdren, page 786. Seize the babies. Force the adoption of all illegitimate babies born to teenage mothers, to minors. That means the overturning of the life, liberty, and property clause in the Constitution, which is your right to have a family, and it's an overturning of the Anglo-Saxon common law, which has the rights of parents in it. None of that matters, says Holdren, because the polar bears, the snail darters, the spotted owls, and the rest of the congeries, the menagerie, are in danger. But now we get the case for compulsory birth control, involuntary fertility control, as he calls it. We've already talked about compulsory abortions. That's the nuclear option. But there are other ways, some of them quite compulsory too. Holdren discusses India in the 1960s and 70s, where various governments imposed vasectomies, sterilization imposed on fathers with more than 2 children, compulsory sterilization, implantation of long-term sterilization capsules. This has been done for the last 20 years. A marketable license for childbirth, baby licenses that you'll have to pay for, and then sterilization of the population through chemicals put into drinking water and food. That is the genocidal litany of John P. Holdren.